He went to the auction looking for answers, not redemption. But when he saw the girl with his late wife's necklace, time stopped. She wasn't just another captive. She was a ghost in the flesh. The heat didn't slow the bidding. If anything, it made it worse. Dust clung to sweat-slicked necks, and the men's voices rang louder with every raise of a hand, every desperate offer tossed toward the crooked stage. Some were there for labor, some for worse. No law ran the edges of Redwater except the one you bought with silver, and today silver sang like a whip. Silas Dane leaned against the hitching post, arms crossed, eyes narrow under the rim of his battered hat. He hadn't meant to come here, wasn't planning on setting foot in Redwater again if he could help it. Too many memories stained into the boards of this place. But he'd gotten a letter from Ezra, a short one, just 6 words. Come see for yourself, noon sharp. That was enough. Silas hadn't seen Ezra in 4 years, not since the fire, not since Rachel's name was still spoken like it wasn't wrapped in pain. And yet here he stood, boots planted firm as the sun climbed higher, watching the auctioneer drag another girl by the wrist toward the block. Young, pale, terrified. Her hair had been hacked short, her dress the same rough-spun as all the others, but her eyes darted like a wild thing not yet broken. The bids came fast. 2 ranchers, 1 old saloon man. Then a silence as she stared back at the crowd and spat into the dirt. The crowd howled. The saloon man doubled his offer. The gavel came down. Gone. Another girl shoved forward, and another. Silas didn't flinch, didn't blink, not until she stepped up. 4th in line, barefoot, thin as sorrow, head down. But the chain around her neck glinted. His blood ran cold. It wasn't the girl. He didn't recognize her face, not her posture, but the necklace. Silver, small, a locket no bigger than a coin, dented on one side from when Rachel had dropped it during the storm in '72. Silas had spent half a day digging through mud to find it. She used to wear it always, even after the doctor said the chain was too tight. It holds tighter than you ever did, she teased. That locket had been buried with her. He'd made sure of it. So why in God's mercy was it hanging from this girl's neck? The girl raised her eyes, not timid, not pleading, just tired, and when they met his, something in them buckled. She knew. Silas stepped forward before he thought it through, hands at his sides. The auctioneer barely noticed him over the bids. 1 man yelled 10, another called 12. Silas didn't shout, he just lifted his hand. 200. Silence. The crowd turned. 200, the auctioneer scoffed, for this one. Silas didn't speak again. The auctioneer glanced at the other men. Nobody topped it. Sold. The gavel dropped. The girl didn't move. A thick-set handler jerked the rope tied to her wrists and shoved her toward Silas. She stumbled, caught herself, kept her eyes down. Silas reached into his coat, laid the coins flat in the auctioneer's palm. Unbind her. The handler blinked. That ain't how. Now. There was something in his tone, or maybe the way he didn't bother reaching for his gun, that made the man think twice. He sliced the rope. The girl rubbed her wrists, still silent. Silas turned without a word and walked. She followed. Behind them the crowd murmured. Another girl dragged up. More bids, more screams. By the time they reached the edge of town, the dust had thickened. His horse snorted and stomped as they approached. Silas stopped at the trough, drew water in a tin cup, handed it to her. She drank fast, careful not to spill. Name, he asked. She hesitated, then soft as dusk, Lion. He nodded, waited. She handed the cup back, but didn't meet his gaze. That necklace, he said, where did you get it? She stiffened, eyes flicked toward his chest, then down. A woman gave it to me, in Wyoming. Name. I never knew it. She was sick. She said it needed to go somewhere safe. Silas swallowed. When? 2 years ago. The locket hung between them now. He could see the dent, the chain, the tarnish on the clasp, Every detail screamed truth and impossibility all at once. She said, Lion faltered, she said her husband wouldn't find peace unless it got home. Silas felt the weight of it like a stone to the chest. There'd been no body after the fire, just ash. He'd buried what he could. The necklace had been missing, but he thought it was just gone. But if Rachel hadn't died in the fire, or if she had, but later, and somehow Lion had crossed paths with her. It didn't make sense. Yet nothing else ever had either. He mounted up, reached down, ride with me. She climbed up behind him. They rode in silence for miles. The dry land stretched in all directions, empty but watching. Silas kept his thoughts close. Lion didn't ask questions. They reached his ranch by dusk. The old place sat tucked between a rise and a slow bend in the river. He hadn't touched the west fence in 3 years. The barn roof sagged in places, but it was home. She didn't say a word as he helped her down. I ain't gonna chain you, you're free, he said, but I need to know who gave you that locket. I told you. I need to see it. She hesitated, unclasped the chain, handed it to him. He opened the locket. Inside 2 photos, one of Rachel, one of him, younger, wild-eyed, holding a newborn wrapped in blue. He staggered back. That photo had never left his drawer. Never. He snapped the locket shut. You're staying here, he said, no arguing. Lion looked like she might, but didn't. He led her inside. Lit the lantern, poured coffee, sat her at the table. I need every word, he said. Start from the beginning. And so she did. Slowly, haltingly. About the woman in Wyoming with pale skin and coughing fits. About the small shack in the hills. About the day she found her there half-frozen, whispering names in her sleep. About the stories she told in her fever. About the necklace. The fire. The man she loved but lost. Silas listened like a man being carved open. She had no reason to lie. And yet the truth didn't fit. Not clean, not neat, but it matched too much to be coincidence. He stared at the fire long after she went asleep. If Rachel had lived even a day past that fire. If she had crawled away. If she'd given this locket to a stranger. What did it mean? And why had that stranger shown up in Redwater now? Tomorrow he'd ride to Wyoming. But tonight he sat with the past hanging around his neck, and a name he hadn't spoken aloud in years lingering in the room like smoke. The morning came hard. Sun wasn't even over the ridge yet, but Silas was already saddled, rifle strapped, coffee still bitter in his gut. Lion stood at the porch's edge, watching him. She hadn't said a word since last night's fire died, just stared at the necklace in his hand when he passed it back, lips pressed so tight it looked like pain. You're not coming, he told her. I know. I'll be back in a week. She nodded. But something in her eyes, wary waiting, said she didn't believe that. He left her with food, water, the hound that never barked, and one loaded revolver. Then he turned the horse east, toward the scrublands and bad dreams that were Wyoming. The trail was harder than it had any right to be. Too many years since he'd gone this far, too many ghosts on the road. He passed through burnt-out townships and hollow mines, stopped once in a place called Grady's Crossing for jerky and grain. Nobody there remembered a pale woman with coughing fits. Nobody ever did. But when he crossed the Tatonka Ridge, high and thin with air, he found the shack. Just like Lion described it. Abandoned now. Roof caved in, door swinging loose. But there were signs, scratches on the threshold, a rusted tin cup still hanging by a nail, and under the floorboards, tucked in a cracked mason jar, 3 things. A torn page from a Bible, a faded handkerchief with the initials R.D. And a letter. The name on it was his. Silas. I prayed you'd find this, though I don't deserve to hope. I watched the fire from the ridge. Thought I saw you fall. Thought I died watching, but I lived. And I walked. And I hurt. Not just in the body. You'll never know how much. I didn't come back because there was nothing left. I didn't send word because shame does worse to the throat than smoke ever could. And when the fever took hold, I thought maybe my end would mean peace for both of us. I gave the necklace to a girl who reminded me of hope. I told her it belonged to a better man. If you find her, be kind. If you find this, I'm sorry for everything. Rachel. Silas sat there with the letter in his lap, his thumb running over the corner like he could smooth out the years. He didn't cry, not the kind of man who did, but the stillness in him, the thing that had slept since that fire shook awake. He left the shack before nightfall, letter in his breast pocket, handkerchief wrapped tight in his palm. It took 4 days to ride home. When he reached the ridge above his ranch, something was wrong. Smoke, small, dark, recent, curled from the chimney, but no light shone from the windows. The barn door hung open. The fence by the gate was splintered. And his hound lay still in the dirt. Silas's heart kicked hard. He dismounted and moved quiet, boots silent in the grass. His rifle was already in hand. He crept around the side, past the rain barrel, past the broken trough. A man stood on the porch. Broad shoulders, black coat, gold ring flashing as he tapped a cigarette against his thumb. 2 others sat on horses nearby. And Lion. She was kneeling, tied, blood on her cheek. The man looked up as Silas stepped into view. "Ah," he said, smiling like a snake. "Mr. Dane, I was starting to think you didn't care about your property." Silas did lower the rifle. "That's no way to greet a host. You left a girl all alone out here. Law says unclaimed property reverts." "Law says no such thing." The man shrugged. "Redwater law does, and I happen to write it." Silas took a step closer. The men on the horses shifted. "I know that necklace," the man said, nodding toward Lion. "It's been missing near on 2 years, belonged to a fine lady. Someone shot her husband in a fire, they said." Silas's jaw clenched. "She gave it to me," he said, "with a letter. You want to read it?" "I want the girl." "She's not yours. She was bought at auction, then left. You got no deed, no record, just a pretty face and a dead hound." Silas looked at Lion. Her eyes were steady but afraid. "You come for her again," Silas said, voice low. "You better bring more than 2 cowards and a bag of lies." The man's smile faded. "She's just a girl." "No," Silas said. "She's the reason I'm still breathing." There was a silence. Then a shot cracked the air. One of the men on horseback went down, rifle kicked from his hands. Ezra stepped from the tree line behind them, eyes narrowed, shotgun raised. "I missed on purpose," he called. The second man bolted. The one on the porch turned, spat. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You first," Silas said, and slammed the butt of his rifle across the man's jaw. He hit the ground hard. Silas knelt and cut the rope around Lion's wrists. She was trembling now, eyes brimming. He didn't say a word, just pulled her up and held her while her breath shook and stuttered. Ezra came close, nudged the unconscious man with his boot. "That the one who ran the show back in Redwater?" Silas nodded. "Mercer," he said. "He's been buying girls out of mining camps for years, sells them in town under indenture, dresses it like law." Ezra glanced at Lion. "He's the one who sold her." "Likely. You want him breathing." Silas didn't answer right away. "Then let the sheriff handle it, for once." Ezra raised an eyebrow but said nothing. They tied Mercer over his own saddle, sent him back with Ezra. Silas stayed behind with Lion. That night she didn't sleep. Neither did he. They sat by the fire, the necklace between them again, and the letter folded neat beside the lamp. "I don't understand," she said at last. "Why did she give it to me? Why me?" "Rachel had a way of seeing what people were," Silas murmured. "Not just what they looked like, what they could be." Lion swallowed hard. Do you think she meant for me to find you? I think, Silas said slowly, she meant for us to find each other. The fire cracked. Lion traced a finger over the letter's edge. I don't belong here, she whispered. You belong anywhere you're safe. Silas looked at her, saw the weight she carried, the years, the miles, the things she hadn't spoken aloud. You're not just another face, he said. You never were. She nodded slow. But he knew it would take time. And maybe that was the point. Rachel had given him time once, time to fall in love, time to change, time to break. Now maybe she'd given him one last chance. To rebuild. To protect. To start again. He poured them each a cup of coffee, set the extra locket on the table and said quietly, Tomorrow we ride to Redwater. Lion looked up, eyes steady. To do what? To end this. They rode out before dawn. Silas didn't speak much as the ranch disappeared behind them, swallowed by mist and memory. Lion rode a quiet mare beside him, her posture straighter than before, eyes set on the horizon like she decided not to blink until the sun admitted she belonged here. The necklace she once wore now lay, wrapped in a square of cloth inside Silas's coat pocket. Rachel's letter was folded beside it. He didn't know what they'd find in Redwater, but he knew what had to happen. Mercer's reach had to be broken, and the chains disguised as contracts had to be burned. They followed the south route, the one Silas used to take when Rachel was alive and they needed medicine from the old doctor who lived past Bitter Peak. It was quieter than the west road. Fewer riders, fewer questions. The sky was a steel lid above them, the kind that promised thunder but never delivered it when you needed it most. Birds kept low. Even the wind seemed uneasy. 3 hours in, Lion asked, what was she like? It took Silas a moment to answer, Rachel. She nodded. She was stubborn, not loud about it, but once she got a thought in her head, nothing could scrape it out. She hated pickles, loved lilac, said I looked better in black, which I never agreed with. He paused, thumb grazing his reins. She sang while she worked, and she always knew when I was lying, even to myself. Lion didn't say anything for a while. Then, did she love you? Silas let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. She said she did, but more than that, she stayed when she didn't have to. They reached the bend near Iron Wash by noon. The river ran shallow, its surface broken by hoof prints and low-slung brush. Silas stopped at the bank, leaned forward in the saddle. Tracks. Fresh. Riders, he said, 4, maybe 5 light horses eastbound. Mercer, Lion asked. Could be, or his buyers. They pushed harder after that. By the time the church steeple of Redwater pierced the sky, the light had turned gold and sharp. Shadows fell long across the ground. Silas guided them behind a ridge, tethered the horses, then led Lion down a dry creek bed that wound behind the old mill. From there the town opened up like a wound, familiar, ugly. The auction stage still stood in the square, stained and weathered, the platform's planks warped with the weight of too many names never spoken again. There were no girls lined up today, but a wagon sat near the edge, covered in canvas, guarded by 2 men in dusters and rifles. Silas crouched behind a hitching post, eyes scanning. That's Mercer's rig, he murmured. Means he's back or expected. What's the plan? Lion asked. He looked at her. And in that moment, something shifted. This wasn't a girl who needed saving anymore. This was someone who'd crossed deserts on foot, who'd knelt bloodied before men with no hearts, and still had enough strength left to look him in the eye. We go slow, he said, and when the time comes, we don't flinch. They waited until night fell. Shadows took the square, the guards grew lax, a saloon door flapped open and shut, laughter spilled into the dust. Silas crept forward, Lion followed. They reached the wagon without a word. Silas cut the canvas. 6 girls inside. One barely 10. They stared back wide-eyed, silent. "Easy," he whispered. "We're getting you out." Lion climbed up, spoke soft Mandarin. The girls blinked, nodded. One of them reached for her hand. "Keys," Lion said. "They're chained." Silas cursed under his breath. "Stay here." He moved to the guard nearest the saloon. The man had leaned back against a post, rifle laid across his lap, half asleep. It took one swing of Silas's fist to end that problem. The second guard saw it. He shouted, reached for his gun, but Lion was faster than anyone should be after what she'd lived through. She shoved a barrel against his back and said, "Don't." The man froze. Silas found the keys. Freed the girls. They scattered like birds to brush, silent, practiced, frightened. But not Lion. She stayed. Silas stared at her. "Go with them." She shook her head. "No." He didn't argue. Not when her voice sounded like steel. The town started to stir. Doors opened. Voices called. And then Mercer stepped into the square, hands high, smirking. "Well," he said, "if it ain't the ghost of Rachel Dane and her savior." Silas raised his rifle. "You're done." Mercer laughed. "No, see, you're not in Redwater anymore. You're in my town, my laws, my gallows." "Your gallows are empty." "Not for long." Behind him men gathered, 12 at least, maybe more, some with pistols, others with whips, a few too young to know better, one or two too mean to care. Lion stood beside Silas. He looked at her, then out at the street. "I ain't got enough bullets," he muttered. "Then make the first one count," she said. It came fast after that. Gunfire, screams, horses bolting. A lantern fell and shattered, flames caught. Silas fired once. Mercer jerked, spun, hit the ground hard. But the others kept coming. Lion ducked behind a barrel, aimed low, took out one man's legs. Silas dropped another at 10 paces, then another. Smoke thickened. Fire licked the edge of the saloon. Then hoofbeats. A cry from the ridge. And Ezra again, this time not alone. 7 riders behind him, ranchers, old friends. One preacher with a rifle bigger than his faith. The fight tipped. Redwater became a war zone. By dawn it was ash. Mercer was dead. Half his men fled, the others buried. The wagon burned, but not before the girls were safe. Lion stood beside the well, blood on her sleeve, necklace clutched tight. Silas walked to her, rifle dangling. "You all right?" She nodded once. Then quieter, "They won't stop, will they?" "No," he said, "but neither will we." They rode out by noon. The girls were taken to New Glory, a town with rules and clean water. Silas gave them coins, names of good people, a promise that not all men were devils in boots. Lion didn't go with them. She stayed beside Silas. When they reached the ridge above his ranch again, the land looked different. Not healed, but possible. Like the kind of place someone might choose to live instead of just survive. He dismounted slow. Turned. She stood still. The wind tugged her hair. And for the first time since Rachel died, Silas felt something that wasn't pain. "Come inside," he said. Lion hesitated, then nodded, and walked beside him. They didn't speak of Redwater for a while. The days that followed were quieter, like the land itself needed time to exhale. Silas repaired the barn door. Lion swept the hearth clean, lit sage and pine needles in the corners the way her mother used to, letting smoke and prayer fill the rafters. The place began to smell like a home again, not just dry wood and dust, but memory softened into comfort. And slowly, word began to spread. People came. The first was a girl no older than 16. Hair hacked short, eyes the color of old bruises. She didn't give a name, just stood on the edge of the field where the fence was half-mended and waited until Silas waved her in. Lion fed her, gave her water. She left at dawn with a satchel of supplies and a quiet nod. The next week 2 more arrived. By month's end, there had been a dozen. Not all stayed, most didn't, but each left lighter than when they came, each with something small, a scarf, a name, a piece of advice whispered like gospel beneath the trees. It wasn't a ranch anymore. It was refuge. And Lion. She became its heart. She never said much about what happened before the auction block, but sometimes when the wind hit just right, Silas would catch her standing in the field with her face turned toward the sky, lips moving in a language he couldn't understand. He never asked. He didn't have to. Grief speaks without needing translation. Then in the 4th month, a letter came. No return name, just a single line inside. I know that necklace, I know her. Don't let her forget who she is. There was no signature. Just a place, Crenshaw Hollow. Lion read it once. Then set it down and said, "We leave at first light." Silas packed without question. They rode 2 days through broken hills and dry gulches, past the bleached remains of things the map didn't bother to name anymore. Crenshaw Hollow wasn't a town. It was barely a settlement, 7 cabins, 1 church, and a barn that had collapsed sometime last winter. But there were people. Miners mostly. Wives. Children. A few older women who looked at Lion like they'd seen her before. Silas kept close. When the man came out of the chapel, bent back, beard gone silver, hands too clean to be poor, Lion tensed. He walked with a limp, but his eyes were sharp. "Her name was Zume," he said. Silas moved forward. "You knew her?" The man nodded. 10 years before she disappeared. Lion stepped between them. "That was my sister." The man paused, took a long breath. "She came here sick. Had a fever that didn't break for weeks. When she woke, she couldn't remember her own name, only that she had a sister with a ribbon in her hair." Lion reached for the necklace. "She gave this away," she said, "traded it at the border." "She didn't trade it," the man replied gently. "She gave it to a child, said it had too many memories." He led them to the church. Inside was dark, cooler than outside, candles burning low. She passed a year later, buried on the hill. They followed him to the back. The hill was small, ringed with wildflowers. No marker, no stone, just a bundle of sticks tied with faded red ribbon. Lion knelt. She didn't cry, didn't speak. But the way her hands rested on the earth told Silas everything. That night they stayed in a lean-to offered by one of the miners. Lion didn't sleep. She sat outside, fingers playing absently with the necklace. "May was older," she said at last, "braver. She always kept me safe. Even when the world fell apart, her voice cracked. And I forgot her name. For a long time I thought I dreamed her." "She didn't forget you," Silas said. Lion looked up. "She crossed a country to give that necklace away," he continued, "to keep something of you alive." The fire snapped between them. Lion stared at the flame like it might burn a path back to before. Then finally, "I'm not sure who I am without her." "You're who she hoped you'd become." Lion held his gaze, then stood, and dropped the necklace into the fire. Silas moved, startled, but she held up a hand. "I don't need it anymore," she whispered. The chain melted. The locket turned black, then cracked. And for the first time, Lion exhaled like someone who could finally stand on her own. They returned to the ranch 2 days later. But things weren't as they'd left them. A note pinned to the door. Ezra's handwriting. "They came again, 2 riders looking for her. I stalled them, said you were gone to the coast, but they'll be back soon, be ready." Silas crumpled the note, stared across the hills. Mercer's partners, Lion asked. Or worse. They prepared the ranch. Taught the girls how to hide, how to fire a rifle if they had to. Dug trenches behind the barn, reinforced the windows. The storm came 3 nights later. Rain first, cold, relentless, then the riders. 4 of them. No names. Faces masked. Guns drawn. They called for Lion. Silas stood at the gate, shotgun across his chest. She ain't yours. She's property. Not anymore. The first shot hit the post beside his head. He dropped one of them with a single return fire. Then chaos. Lion fired from the loft. One of the girls tossed oil from the roof, lit it, turned the ground into flame. Horses screamed. The rain fell harder. When it was over, 3 of the 4 men were dead. The last crawled away into the dark, arms shattered. Silas let him go. He'll tell them, Lion said. Good. Why? Because now they know we don't run. In the aftermath, the ranch didn't return to normal. It became legend. People whispered about the girl who burned a necklace to bury her past. The man who stood guard over the forgotten. The land that turned into a promise. But for Silas and Lion, the quiet after the storm meant something more. It meant they'd chosen. Not just to survive, but to rebuild. And this time together. The land changed with the season. Where there had once been bare earth and wire fences, spring brought blooms wild and reckless, pale bluebonnets and sunflowers that towered like sentinels. Silas used to say Rachel had planted them once, way back when. But now they came back without her, like she'd whispered something into the soil that kept growing long after she was gone. Lion walked those same fields now. She carried a basket and a notebook, a new habit picked up from one of the girls who'd passed through the one who dreamed of being a teacher. Lion didn't write about the past, not exactly, but she wrote names. The names of every girl who'd come and gone, every girl who'd stood on that auction block and found something stronger waiting for her at the edge of Silas's land. She wrote them the way Scripture writes saints, quiet, unwavering, and eternal. Ezra stopped by every 2 weeks like clockwork, bringing supplies and updates from neighboring towns. He told them Mercer's old network was fraying, that a few of the buyers had vanished, that others were now being watched by folks with more guns and less patience for injustice. Redwater was abandoned, burned down to its bones, and no one had dared try rebuilding it. You've done something here, Ezra said one night as they sat on the porch. I don't think you see it, but you've carved out a piece of land where women who were forgotten now have names again, futures. Silas didn't answer, just passed him the coffee. But later that night, he found Lion still awake, bent over the kitchen table, drawing something on a piece of parchment. It wasn't writing this time, it was a map. What's that? He asked, leaning over her shoulder. She traced the edges with her fingertip. It's everything, she whispered, a way to find us for others if they're still out there. Silas watched her for a long moment, then reached for a pen. He added a mark, a small black square where the barn stood, then another further west where the river curved like a hook. She smiled. And for the first time, Silas realized that she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building. The next morning, thunder rolled in. Real thunder this time, not the kind that passed harmless across the hills, but deep and low, rumbling from a sky the color of steel wool. Silas squinted west, past the line of trees, to where the horizon blurred. It wasn't just rain. Smoke. He saddled the horses without a word. Lion was already tying her hair back, strapping her boots tight. You saw it, she asked. Someone lit something big. Ezra arrived an hour later, soaked to the bone, a rifle slung across his chest. They torched the Thompson homestead, he said without climbing down. Didn't take anything, just burned it, left a mark on the barn wall. He pulled a piece of cloth from his coat pocket. Blackened, but the symbol was still there, two knives crossed beneath a brand that looked like an eye. Lion froze. "I've seen that," she said slowly. "Back east before." Silas held the cloth up to the light. "Who are they?" "They're not slavers," she said. "Worse, they call themselves the cleaners. They think mercy is weakness, that girls like us should have died where we stood." Ezra swore under his breath. "You saying this is punishment?" "I'm saying it's a warning." That night the ranch didn't sleep. They fortified everything, reinforced the barn doors, laid fresh traps beyond the tree line, moved the youngest girls into the cellar with enough food and water for 2 weeks. Then they waited. For days nothing came. And then in the middle of the 6th night, the wind changed. It didn't howl, it whispered. Low. Unnatural. Silas rose from bed with a start. He wasn't alone. Lion was already at the window, rifle in hand. "They're here," she said. They didn't come through the front gate. They moved like smoke, low, wide, silent. Men in dark coats with blades that gleamed like teeth. There were 10 of them, maybe more. And at the center, a woman. She didn't wear a mask. She didn't need to. Her face was pale, hollow, eyes rimmed in kohl, hair pulled back tight like she didn't believe in softness. Silas watched her from the loft, rifle trained. She stepped forward, boots sinking into the mud. "Lion," she called, "my dear sister." Lion's breath caught. Silas stared. "Sister." "She's lying," Lion hissed. "She used to call all of us that." The woman smiled. "You stole something from us, you gave them hope. That's dangerous." Silas fired. The bullet missed by inches. Then all hell broke loose. The cleaners charged. Silas barely had time to reload before 3 were already at the fence. Lion moved like wind, shot clean, hit harder. One man went down with a scream. Another tried the barn door and was met with a shotgun blast from Ezra, who'd hidden in the hayloft. Girls poured from the cabin, not to flee but to fight. They'd been trained. They knew the land better than the attackers did. It wasn't war, it was justice. By dawn, the fields were silent. 7 cleaners dead. The others vanished into the trees. The woman who called herself Sister was gone, 2, blood trailing behind her into the fog. They buried the bodies at the edge of the orchard. Marked them only with stones. No names, no prayers. Lion sat by the fire that night, hands raw, eyes rimmed red. "She wasn't wrong," she said. "I did give them hope, but not because I'm a sister, because I'm done being afraid." Silas poured her a cup of coffee. They didn't speak after that. But in the morning, they began again. New lumber for the gate. Fresh paint for the fences. A new girl arrived the next week, silent, missing 2 fingers, eyes older than her years. Lion welcomed her with a soft voice and a clean blanket. Silas handed her a hammer. "Can you swing this?" he asked. She nodded. And that was enough. The map grew fuller. The garden bloomed wider. The scars didn't fade, but they didn't rule either. Silas still missed Rachel. Some nights he stood under the stars and swore he could hear her humming in the wind. But he didn't sleep alone anymore. Not because of romance, not yet. But because of purpose. Because somewhere along the line, the world had broken. And instead of looking away, he and Lion had chosen to build again. Brick by brick. Name by name. Girl by girl. The ranch became more than a whisper. By the time the 6th summer came around, travelers didn't just stumble upon it. They sought it out. Broken wagons would appear at the edge of the property with wheels chewed through and passengers with more blisters than shoes. Refugees, runaways, some with babies swaddled tight and hope clinging by threads. They came with stories no one else wanted to hear. Lion listened to every single one. They called it the last turn. Not because it was the end of something, but because it was the only place left to turn when everything else had given out. Silas never meant to lead anything, but over time he became the center by sheer gravity. He knew how to fix roofs. He knew how to build fences that didn't give in the wind. But most of all, he knew how to spot people who could be trusted, and how to give those who couldn't a reason to leave peacefully. The ones who stayed learned to earn what they needed. They worked. They healed. They taught others to do the same. There was a well dug by a girl with no name, arms thick with old scars but strong enough to swing a pickaxe like thunder. There was a loom room now, run by a soft-voiced woman named Teresa, who used to be called number 17 in a mine somewhere up north. There were barns, gardens, even a schoolhouse fashioned from salvaged beams and chalkboards stolen from the ruins of a ghost town. At the front of it all was Lion, no longer shadow-thin, no longer just surviving, but standing tall in the chapel doorway each Sunday, calling names into the wind. Names of the dead. Names of the missing. Names of the saved. They rang out like bells. One morning in late fall, while frost still clung to the fence rails, a rider came bearing a letter. He was young, eyes too bright, and didn't know who to give it to, so he handed it to Ezra. Ezra read it, frowning deeper with each line. Then, without a word, he rode hard into town. He returned before sundown, and Silas knew something was wrong just by the way the man didn't dismount. They found the last camp, Ezra said. Down near Verd Canyon, 43 girls, every one of them branded. Silas's jaw locked. Did anyone survive? One, Ezra handed over the letter. She sent this, says she knows Lion. Silas brought it inside. Lion was sitting with a girl no older than 9, teaching her to write her name in the dirt with a stick. When Silas approached, she stood, brushing the dust from her skirt. She says her name is June, Silas said quietly. She says she knew you, from the workhouse in Canton. Lion froze. Then took the letter. It was written in careful, broken English, but the words cut deep. They are back, the ones with eyes on their coats, the cleaners, but they are not just looking for girls now, they are looking for the map. She handed the letter to Silas, her face tight. I knew this would happen. We were careful. Careful wasn't enough. Silas studied her. How would they even know about the map? She looked toward the schoolhouse, then to the chapel. We sent copies to safe houses, to those we trusted. Silas didn't speak for a long while. Then simply, we have to assume it's in the wrong hands now. Ezra confirmed it later that night. One of the safe houses in Blanco had gone silent. No signs of struggle, no bodies, just gone, burned to the stone, and on the charred front wall, the same symbol. 2 knives beneath an eye. The cleaners weren't finished. And now they were hunting knowledge, not just women. Lion gathered the older girls. They met in the barn with lanterns lit and hammers near. Silas stood at the back, arms crossed, listening. They're not just looking to erase us, she said. They're looking to erase what we've built. That map tells the story of how we survived, of every girl who found her way back from the dark. The teacher stood. Then we burn it, all of it. If they want to erase our story, let's make it so they never find the truth to twist. No, Lion said firmly. We don't destroy it. We bury it where they'll never find it and keep building so fast they can't catch up. A plan formed quickly. Within 3 days, they made 5 copies of the map, each encoded with false trails. Silas carved the true one into the underside of Rachel's old rocking chair, because no one ever looked beneath something so ordinary. Ezra took a decoy east. Mai took another south. The others were hidden in the root cellar, the chapel, the loft. Then they waited. It didn't take long. The cleaners returned under a silver moon. This time they brought a preacher. Not the kind with scripture in his hands, but the kind who used old words like weapons and twisted mercy into a curse. He called himself Brother Caleb. "We come not with violence," he said at the gate, "but with correction. You've led women from the path, turned them feral. We've come to restore balance." Lion stepped out alone. She wore no weapon, but the way she stood made the earth feel steadier. "You don't get to call it balance," she said, "just because you've learned to hold a knife better than a book." The man smiled. "The Lord will judge." "No," she replied, "he already has, and he didn't pick your side." Brother Caleb made the signal, but the cleaners found the ground beneath their feet collapsing. Pitfalls, snare traps, hidden fire trenches lit with oil. They screamed, fell, and those who didn't were driven off by rifles, arrows, and women who no longer feared being prey. In the end, the preacher was left alone at the gate. Silas approached with the old shotgun. "You can leave," he said, "or we plant you in the back like the rest." Brother Caleb spit at his boots. "You think you've won." Silas stepped closer. "No," he said, "I think we've survived, again, and will keep surviving longer than you can imagine." He let the man go. Lion didn't object. Some battles were won in dirt and fire, others in patience. They buried their dead, 2 girls, barely grown, who had fought with the kind of bravery no child should ever have to summon. Their names went into the book, carved in stone, spoken aloud, and then silence again. For months there was peace. Lion walked the fields and taught the younger ones to braid rope, to till soil, to spot signs of a rider from a mile off. Silas fixed a windmill someone had built wrong back in the spring, and started writing in a journal Rachel had once kept by the bedside. They lived, not easily, but truly, until one late autumn morning when a man rode in from the east, dust-covered, alone. He dismounted with shaking hands and pulled a locket from his coat. Not just any locket, the same locket Rachel had once worn. Silas stepped forward slowly. The man bowed his head. "I found her," he said. "I found her grave." The earth moved beneath Silas's feet. Lion caught his arm. He didn't say a word, just stared at the locket, now held out in the man's palm. Burnished gold, a small crack near the hinge. His breath left him. The past, it seemed, wasn't done with them yet. Silas hadn't touched the locket since the day they laid Rachel in the ground. That grave beneath the birch tree on the hill, the one he visited each Sunday with coffee and a silence he never broke. He remembered burying her with it in her hands, curled around the chain like it was part of her soul. And yet here it was again, in the palm of a stranger, carried hundreds of miles west through dust and danger and time. He didn't take it, couldn't. Instead, he looked up slowly and asked the only question that mattered. "Where?" The rider's voice trembled. "North of Bent Ridge, a settlement gone to rot. She wasn't alone." "Who else?" The man's face twisted. "Children, dozens, all gone except one girl, and the grave. Yours was the only name scratched on the stone." Silas finally took the locket, cold, lighter than it should have been. He turned it in his hand and saw what had been carved on the back, a single line, shallow and shaky. "To the man who taught me freedom had a price." He staggered back a step. The wind knocked from him not by violence but memory. Lion watched from the porch. She didn't ask, she knew. That night Silas didn't sleep. He sat beneath the stars with the locket in one hand and Rachel's old journal in the other. Pages faded, edges curled. He'd only read it once, long ago, and never finished. But now, by firelight, he opened it again. Page after page of her voice. March 3rd, They're selling girls again in Dawson's Hollow. I tried to stop them, but the sheriff looked away. I won't forget their faces. April 12th. If something happens to me, I pray someone continues this. Every name I write is one more reason to keep going. June 8th. I've hidden the map inside the locket. If I die, it must not be lost. Someone has to know what we saw, what we did. Silas stared at the final entry, hands trembling. Rachel hadn't died by accident. She had died protecting something. Someone. And now, all these years later, it had found its way back home. The next morning, Lion found him in the chapel. The locket lay open on the altar, and beneath the tiny photograph inside was a curled sliver of paper, so small, so carefully folded it could have been overlooked a dozen times. He unrolled it and laid it flat. It wasn't a map in the traditional sense. Just a sequence of names. All initials. All female. Dozens of them. And at the bottom, one final name. Elsie Last Chance. Lion ran her finger over it. She didn't just want to help them escape. She wanted to keep track of everyone, so no one disappeared. She knew the ones she couldn't save would be forgotten, Silas said quietly, so she wrote them down anyway. Ezra arrived by noon, having heard whispers from a trading post about another slaver camp springing up in Crossfield. They're calling themselves reclaimers now, he said. Same devils, different masks. Silas didn't hesitate. We're going. Lion raised an eyebrow. We. He looked her square in the eye. This doesn't end here. Preparations began that night. Not an exodus. This wasn't about running. It was a branch. A second outpost, one day's ride east, closer to where the bad had started to root again. A place to intercept, to warn, to fight if needed. Silas, Ezra, and 5 others volunteered to leave first light. Lion would stay behind, to protect what they'd built, to guide the new arrivals, to be the memory keeper. Before they left, Silas pulled her aside. You don't have to say anything, he said. But she did anyway. I used to think mercy was the end of strength. That surviving meant turning your heart into a stone, but I was wrong. Mercy is choosing to keep your heart soft, even when the world says to turn it to iron. Silas looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time again. You're stronger than I ever was, he said. She smiled, no, just quieter. They embraced, not as lovers, not yet, maybe never, but as something more sacred, kindred souls who knew what it meant to bleed for something worth protecting. The next morning before dawn they left. The air was cold and sharp, the kind that cracked lips and made boots stiff. But their spines were straight. They rode past the river, past the hill where Rachel lay, past the new orchard where the youngest girls were planting seeds with laughter like birdsong. And they didn't look back. Weeks passed. The second outpost was born in the hollow of a canyon once used by bandits. Now it had walls, a gate, a signal tower, women on lookout, and inside another schoolhouse, another chapel, another field of names written on stone. Lion kept sending letters. So did the others. One by one, the pages of Rachel's journal were filled again, not with sorrow but with updates, with victories, with names. One day, a letter arrived with a name Silas never expected to see. Lion Chang. She had signed it not as a refugee, not as a survivor, but as matron of last chance. The title wasn't official. No one had voted, but everyone used it. She had become what Rachel once was, what Silas had accidentally helped build, a beacon. And for the first time in 20 years, on the morning of his birthday, Silas sat on a porch far from home and laughed. Not loud, not long, but enough. The sun rose slowly behind him. And in the wind, carried by prairie silence and miles of wildflowers, A new voice seemed to echo. Not Rachel's, not Lioness, but something deeper. Like the land itself had decided to speak. You kept them safe. He didn't answer, just tipped his hat to the sky, and kept building.